Turn on CNN and the world is ending. Turn on Fox and everything's fine. Scroll through social media and somehow both sides are calling each other fascists before breakfast. At some point, you just want to know what actually happened. Welcome to The Middle, your source for the week's biggest news, told from both sides, with the facts laid out so you can decide what to think. Every episode, 3 stories, what the left says, what the right says, and then the facts, including the thing neither side is telling you. If that sounds useful, you're in the right place. This is episode 1. Let's get into it. On Thursday, April 2nd, President Trump fired Attorney General Pam Bondi, ending a 14-month tenure that was, depending on who you ask, either a principled crackdown on crime or a political disaster. Trump announced the news on Truth Social, calling Bondi a great American patriot, and offering no specific reason for her departure. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, Trump's former personal defense attorney, steps in as acting AG. Bondi is the second cabinet member Trump has fired in less than a month, following the removal of DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. She leaves while facing a House Oversight Committee subpoena to testify about the Justice Department's handling of the Epstein files scheduled for April 14th. The left's take? The left's argument goes something like this. Bondi spent 14 months turning the Justice Department into a tool for one man's political agenda. She fired career prosecutors who worked on the Capitol riot cases. She gutted the Public Corruption Unit. The Civil Rights Division saw a mass exodus of attorneys who said they were being turned into enforcers for the White House. And now she's out. Not because she went too far, but because she didn't go far enough. That, critics say, is the most alarming part. The problem with Bondi wasn't her loyalty. It's what comes next. The right's take? Well, the right's argument has 2 parts, and they point in opposite directions. The establishment conservative base is that Bondi did her job. Lowest murder rate since 1900, cartel figures taken down, 24 Supreme Court wins, and a DOJ finally purged of the political operatives who spent years targeting Trump. The career bureaucrats she fired were activists in suits, not neutral servants of the law. But a louder part of the right, the MAGA base, and, according to sources close to the White House, Trump himself, is actually cheering her departure. Not because she went too far, but because she didn't go far enough. Comey walked free. Letitia James walked free. Adam Schiff walked free. Multiple sources told Axios the firing was never really about Epstein. It was about the enemies list, and Pam wasn't getting the indictments. The frustration on the right isn't with her direction, it's with her results. So what are the facts? Well, a few things are verifiably here. The murder rate claim is real. FBI data shows homicides have been declining. But that trend predates this administration by a few years, so attributing it entirely to Bondi's tenure is a bit selective. On the Epstein files, Bondi told Fox News in February 2025 that a client list was sitting on my desk right now to review. The DOJ later said no such list existed. Both Democrats and Trump's own base were furious for entirely different reasons. The prosecutions Trump demanded most, the cases against James Comey and New York AG Letitia James, were both dismissed. There wasn't enough evidence to sustain them. Here's the thing neither side is telling you. According to Justice Connection, the advocacy group tracking departures, between 5,500 and 6,400 DOJ employees have left through resignations, firings, or buyouts over the past 14 months. Not all of them attorneys, but many of them are. The Civil Rights Division alone has lost nearly 75% of its attorneys. The Public Integrity Section, the unit that prosecutes corruption, was gutted. The people who know how to build complex federal cases have walked out the door, and the DOJ says it has hired around 3,400 replacements, many of them with little prosecutorial experience. It almost doesn't matter who the next AG is. Former DOJ attorney Stacey Young said what Bondi destroyed in a year could take decades to rebuild. That's true regardless of whether you think the firings were justified or not. Bottom line, the real tension here isn't about Bondi. It's about what the Justice Department is for and whether the next Attorney General can answer that question in a way the law actually allows. Story number 2. On April 1st, NASA launched Artemis 2, the first crewed mission to leave Earth's orbit since Apollo 17, 1972. 4 astronauts are aboard the Orion spacecraft: Commander Reed Wiseman, pilot Victor Glover, mission specialist Christina Koch, and Canadian Space Agency astronaut Jeremy Hansen. The crew completed a successful translunar injection burn on April 2nd, putting them on a course for a moon flyby today, April 6th. They returned to Earth around April 11th. This is a 10-day test flight, no landing yet, but it's the first time humans have headed for the moon in 54 years. The left's take, well, the left largely celebrates this as a vindication of public science investment in international collaboration. NASA's Artemis program involves more than 20 international partners. For those who have watched NASA's budget face pressure alongside other federal programs, the mission is a reminder of what sustained public investment can produce. Some progressive voices have asked why space exploration gets protected funding while housing, healthcare, and climate programs get cut. But broadly, this is a rare moment of bipartisan pride. The right? Well, the right frames this as American exceptionalism in action. This is what happens when the U.S. commits to winning a strategic competition. And space is a competition. China has announced plans for crewed lunar missions. American astronauts near the moon first sends a message. The right also notes this validates the Space Launch System, a program that was nearly canceled multiple times. Results do matter. So what are the facts? The SLS rocket has cost approximately $23 billion in development. That's more than combined budgets of the James Webb Space Telescope, Hubble, and Mars Curiosity rover. This Artemis 2 mission does not land on the moon. That's Artemis 3, currently planned for 2027. These 4 astronauts are flying further from Earth than any human has traveled in over 5 decades. Here's the thing that no one is saying loudly enough, though. China is aiming for a crewed lunar landing by 2030. Unlike the U.S. Artemis program, which has faced years of delays, China's timetable has remained largely on schedule. This isn't just exploration, it is a race. And we may be closer to the finish line than the talking points on either side suggest. For the first time in a generation, 4 humans are heading to the moon. And whether you see this as national pride or strategic necessity, the view from that window is the same. Story 3, the war in Iran. On February 28th, the U.S. and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury. Nearly 900 strikes in 12 hours targeting Iran's military infrastructure, nuclear facilities, and leadership. Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed in the initial wave. Iran retaliated with over 500 ballistic missiles, nearly 2,000 drones aimed at Israel and U.S. military bases across the Gulf. The war is now in its 6th week. As of this weekend, an American F-15 was shot down over Iran on Friday, with both crew members rescued. Iranian missile launch rates have dropped roughly 90% from their peak. Diplomacy remains stalled, with Iran saying trust is at 0. The left's take. Well, the left's objection starts with process. This war was launched without a declaration of war or authorization from Congress, which critics argue violates the War Powers Act. Beyond legality, humanitarian concerns are severe. According to the World Health Organization, at least 18 hospitals and health facilities have been struck. The deadliest single incident was a strike on a girls' elementary school in the city of Minab, which killed more than 170 people, most of them children. The International Atomic Energy Agency found no evidence of a structured nuclear weapons program in Iran when the war began. The left argues this is an illegal war of choice, not necessity. The right's take, well, the right's position centers on a threat Iran represented in the narrow window to act. Iran was the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, funding Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, and proxy groups across the region. They were advancing toward nuclear capability while stalling on inspections. Iran's position was at its weakest in decades, its regional allies degraded, internal protests shaking the regime, its air defenses already damaged in a June 2025 Israel airstrike. The right argues there may never have been a better window, and that a nuclear-armed Iran would be an irreversible threat to Israel and U.S. interests for generations. The facts: the IAEA confirmed Iran had an ambitious nuclear program, but no evidence of an active nuclear weapons program when the strikes began. Iran has fired over 500 ballistic missiles since February 28th, roughly 40% aimed at Israel, 60% at U.S. bases in the Gulf. Israel's air defense system has achieved a 92% interception rate. At least 17 Israeli civilians have been killed. The Strait of Hormuz was threatened, sending oil prices spiking in what the World Bank calls the largest supply disruption since the 1970s energy crisis. Here's what neither side is discussing clearly. A preliminary U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency assessment, which the Trump administration called a political leak, found that Iran had moved much of its stockpile of enriched uranium before the strikes. The underground nuclear facilities were damaged but not collapsed. The assessment concluded the strikes set back Iran's nuclear capability by just months, not years, and certainly not permanently. The stated rationale for the war may not have been achieved. That's awkward for both sides. The left doesn't want to say it because it complicates the humanitarian argument, and the right doesn't want to say it because it complicates the strategic one. The war in Iran is 6 weeks old, the supreme leader is dead, and the core question whether any of this made the world safer doesn't have a clean answer yet. That's the middle for today. 3 stories, both sides, no agenda. If this is useful to you, share it with someone who's tired of being told what to think. See you next time.